The woman standing in my yard told me to get off her property, and for a second I thought she was joking. Then I saw my father's fence lying in pieces beside a dumpster, 40 years of cedar stacked like trash, and I realized she was serious. What she did not know was that my father had surveyed every lot in that neighborhood, and the original boundary map was still locked in a steel cabinet 20 feet behind me. My name is Mason Reed. I am 53, and I spent nearly 3 decades building houses across Central Virginia, which means I know where a wall belongs and what happens when you build one on a lie. After my wife Claire died, I moved back into the old brick house on Hawthorne Lane in Stonebrook Heights. Dad built it in 1979, back when the road was gravel and half the subdivision was soybean fields. He was a licensed surveyor named Thomas Reed, a quiet man who always said, "Measure twice, Mason," because the ground remembers every mistake. The empty lot next door stayed untouched for years until Derek and Vanessa Caldwell bought it and announced they were building the largest house Stonebrook had ever seen. Derek owned a custom home company, and Vanessa chaired the neighborhood design committee, which was convenient if you enjoyed approving your own plans. The first problem appeared when Derek's crew drove wooden stakes almost 11 feet inside my fence. I walked over and told him the line was wrong. Derek barely looked up from his tablet. "We had it surveyed," he said. "Your fence has been wrong for decades." Vanessa stepped out of a black SUV wearing oversized sunglasses and the kind of smile people use when they have already decided you are beneath them. "Mason," she said, "this community is finally improving. Maybe it is time you stopped clinging to every old thing your father left behind." I should have been angry, but grief slows certain reactions down. I looked at the fence Dad and I had built when I was 11, remembered his hand over mine as we leveled the first post, and decided I would not give Vanessa the scene she wanted. I told them to stop work until I verified the line. They did not stop. 3 weeks later, I came home from the hardware store and the entire fence was gone. Vanessa stood near the construction trailer holding a clipboard. "The committee voted to remove it," she said. "It violated neighborhood standards. You destroyed my property." "No," she replied, almost smiling. "We corrected a violation. The notice claimed the fence was 2 inches too tall and had been removed by unanimous decision." The 3 votes came from Vanessa, Derek's golfing partner, and an 82-year-old widow named Marjorie Bell, who later admitted Vanessa brought lemon cake and asked her to sign something she never read. 3 people, 1 slice of cake, and apparently that was enough to erase 40 years of family history. That night I examined the survey Derek had filed with the county. The seal was printed instead of raised, the license number was smudged, and the surveyor's name, Calvin Shore, did not exist in the state database. I sat at my kitchen table listening to the hallway clock tick, and for the first time since Claire died, I felt something stronger than sadness. I felt focused. The next morning, I called an independent surveyor, and what he found did not just prove Derek was wrong, it showed me the missing fence was only the beginning. The independent surveyor's name was Harold Pike, a lean 60-year-old with sunburned forearms and the patient expression of a man who had spent most of his life watching other people argue with dirt. He arrived at 7 the next morning, set up his equipment near the maple tree, and worked for nearly 5 hours without saying much. I followed him from point to point, carrying coffee and trying not to read too much into every pause. Finally, he stood beside the place where my fence had been and looked toward Derek's foundation. "Mason," he said, "their house is 10 feet 9 inches over the legal line. Not close, not a matter of interpretation. Nearly 11 feet of concrete, framing, and steel sitting on land my father had measured before Derek Caldwell was old enough to hold a hammer." Harold's survey matched the original subdivision plat almost perfectly, so I carried a copy next door and handed it to Derek. He read the first page, glanced toward his crew, then folded it once and pushed it back against my chest. "You hired a guy to tell you what you wanted to hear." Vanessa was standing in the doorway behind him, arms crossed. "This neighborhood does not revolve around your memories, Mason." "No," I said, "but property law does revolve around boundaries." She laughed like I had told a joke at the wrong dinner party. I filed a formal complaint with the association, sent it certified mail, and requested an open hearing. Vanessa scheduled a meeting at her house, failed to notify me, and then posted a smiling photo online 2 hours later with a tray of cheese, a candle, and the caption, "Serving our community." When I arrived, she met me at the door and said the committee had already rejected my survey because it did not align with neighborhood standards. "It is a legal survey," I said. "The committee has spoken." There were only 3 committee members present, and the bylaws required 5 for a quorum. In other words, they had not held a meeting, they had held a snack, while Vanessa played government in her dining room. Derek's crew kept building. Concrete trucks started arriving before sunrise and sometimes stayed past midnight, pouring footings for a pool that extended even farther onto my property. I called county inspection, but they told me the wait could be 6 weeks. Derek knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to finish enough of the house that removing it would feel impossible. Then Vanessa filed a complaint against me, claiming I had built an illegal retaining wall. A young county inspector showed up, walked along the edge of Derek's wet concrete, took photographs, and said he could only investigate my address because that was the address listed in the complaint. I remember looking at him, then at the men pouring concrete 20 yards away, and thinking bureaucracy must be the only machine capable of staring directly at a fire and writing a ticket for smoke. The real break came 3 days later when Harold called and told me to check the county land records. Derek had filed a boundary adjustment agreement showing that I had voluntarily transferred nearly 11 feet of my property to him. My name was typed at the top and my signature was at the bottom in blue ink. Except I had never seen the document, never signed it, and whoever copied my name had made the M in Mason backward. I sat in my truck outside the records office for almost an hour, staring at that signature. I was not just angry anymore. I felt violated in a way that was hard to explain. They had torn down something my father built, stepped onto the land he left me, and then used my own name to make the theft look polite. That evening, my neighbor Russell Grant knocked on my door carrying 2 bottles of beer in a folder thick enough to stop a door. Russell had lived on Hawthorne Lane for 32 years, and he knew more neighborhood history than the association itself. He told me Vanessa had forced out 3 other families through selective fines, surprise inspections, and social pressure. One couple received 38 violations in 4 months, including one for a ceramic frog that was apparently inconsistent with the architectural character of the community. Russell also knew something about Derek. Years earlier, Derek had been accused of shifting a property line during another construction project, and the homeowner settled because he could not afford the legal fight. "They pick people who look tired," Russell said quietly. "People who are grieving, older, alone, or scared of lawyers." That sentence stayed with me because it explained why they had chosen me. They saw the widower in the old house and assumed grief had made me weak. What they did not understand was that grief had already taken the worst thing I could lose. The next morning, I opened my father's steel file cabinet and found the original Stonebrook plat, drawn on linen paper, stamped by the county, every measurement sharp and clear. Then I checked the license number on Derek's survey. It belonged to a retired surveyor named Edwin Cole, who had moved to Arizona 12 years earlier. Calvin Shore, the name printed on the document, had never held a surveying license at all. By noon, I was sitting across from a property attorney named Rebecca Sloan, and after reviewing the forged agreement, the fake survey, and the photographs of my destroyed fence, she leaned back and said, "Mason, this is no longer a neighborhood dispute. This is fraud." We built the case in layers. Rebecca filed complaints with the state licensing board and the county prosecutor. Harold supplied a sworn statement. Edwin Cole confirmed in writing that he had never authorized anyone to use his license number. Russell contacted the families Vanessa had driven out, and each agreed to provide records. I installed cameras, requested every permit Derek had filed, and spent 3 nights organizing the evidence into a blue binder, each photograph, date, email, and signature placed in order. Vanessa sensed something was changing, so she called an emergency association meeting and presented a 14-slide report about my grass, my porch light, and a garden hose visible from the road. She proposed fines of $400 a day, retroactive to the date she destroyed my fence. The woman who removed my fence was now fining me for failing to maintain it. After the meeting, Derek cornered me in the parking lot and offered $20,000 for a quitclaim deed. "Sign over the strip," he said, "and Vanessa makes the fines disappear. And if I do not?" He stepped closer. "Then we take your house before you can afford to stop us." I looked at him for a long moment, then said, "My father drew the legal line for this entire neighborhood." Derek smiled. "Your father is dead." I went home without answering, added his offer and threat to the binder, and waited. 2 days later, the association sent me a lien notice for $38,000. That same afternoon, Rebecca called and told me the county had completed its preliminary review. An inspector would arrive Tuesday morning, and she would not be coming alone. Tuesday morning came hot and bright, the kind of Virginia heat that settles on your shoulders before breakfast. I was on the porch with coffee when a county truck turned onto Hawthorne Lane, followed by a sheriff's cruiser. Derek stood beside the foundation, shouting at a crew unloading tile, while Vanessa waited in her SUV. The county inspector, Elaine Mercer, walked onto the site and handed Derek a stop work order. Elaine spread 2 surveys across a folding table, My father's original plat on the left, Derek's fake one on the right, then pointed to the shifted boundary, the stolen license number, and the foundation sitting 10 feet 9 inches inside my property. The deputy asked Derek about the agreement carrying my forged signature. Vanessa rushed over. "This is an HOA matter," she said. Elaine did not look at her. "No, ma'am, this is a county investigation." Derek turned toward his wife. "Stop talking." For months they had moved like one machine, her authority clearing the road and his money doing the damage. Now the machine had jammed. The workers set down their tools. Neighbors came outside, first Russell, then Marjorie, then half the street, pretending they had suddenly remembered their lawns. I stayed on my porch. I had imagined making a speech, but I felt no triumph, only relief. The county voided the permit, ordered every structure on my land removed, and referred the forged documents for criminal review. Demolition lasted 8 days. Each morning, jackhammers broke apart the pool wall on footings Derek had rushed to pour, and by the end, nearly $200,000 of concrete, steel, and labor had been hauled away. Derek's company lost major contracts. Calvin Shore was charged with fraud and practicing without a license. Derek faced charges over the forged filing and later settled my civil case for $230,000. Vanessa's punishment came at a full association meeting where 46 homeowners voted to remove her. She received 2 votes, one from herself and one from Marjorie, who admitted Vanessa had brought lemon cake again. My lien disappeared, every fine was canceled, and the families Vanessa had pushed out said they wished someone had stopped her sooner. I used part of the settlement to start a legal fund for homeowners facing boundary fraud and association abuse. Russell helped me rebuild the fence on a cool Saturday in October. Same cedar, same height, same spacing, placed exactly on the line my father drew decades earlier. When the final post went in, I pressed the level against it. The bubble sat dead center. "Your dad would have checked it twice," Russell said. "3 times because you were watching," I told him. And for the first time in years, I laughed without feeling guilty. I framed Dad's survey and hung it beneath his photograph in the hallway. Sometimes I still wonder whether I went too far. Derek lost his business, Vanessa lost her place in the community, and their unfinished house became a warning everyone had to drive past. Some neighbors said they deserved everything. Others said I should have taken the money and avoided destroying 2 lives. So tell me what you think. When someone steals your land, forges your name, and uses community power to silence you, is exposing everything justice, or can justice become revenge when the consequences are big enough? Leave your verdict in the comments. Share this story with someone who has faced an HOA bully, and subscribe, because sometimes the quietest person on the street is the one keeping the best records.